All right. We've got one more presentation. Katie's coming on now. Hey, Katie, I have a bunch of stuff that I'll put in the live chat as I mentioned. Before we dive into Katie's, real quick though, I just want to shout out Riverside again, sponsoring this event. There's a lot of good tools for running webinars. Most of them are very expensive. So let's say I wanted to run this exact same workshop on a different tool, like a webinar specific tool. It would probably run me about $500 a month, but I pay $24 a month for Riverside and it allows me to do basically the same thing. And it's awesome. Riverside also has the ability to stream live on YouTube and LinkedIn, which I chose not to do for this, but you could just click a button and it will automatically send your live stream out for your workshops or webinars to those platforms too. And then afterwards, which I am going to do, I'm going to use the AI powered editing to chop stuff up. We're going to make clips for social. We're going to chop it up by presenter so that we have shorter videos. And that's all just so easy. You literally just highlight the text and then export it and it will clean up audio. It'll remove ums and ahs, pauses, etc. It's really good. Thanks again to Riverside. Check it out at riverside.fm. Okay, cool. Katie, welcome. Thank you for being here and for doing this. You've been doing some really cool stuff with Lovable, which is a tool that we haven't really talked about yet. So I guess that's an important part of this workshop is there's a bunch of tools you can do this with. Each of them have different strengths and weaknesses. So we've seen Cursor, we've seen Replit. Now we'll talk a little bit about Lovable and some of the stuff that you've been up to with it. So first, would you mind, Katie, introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, and then let's dive in.
Yeah. So my name is Katie. I am a freelance content marketer, writer, and strategist. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. And I specialize in thought leadership. If you've been around content marketing for a while, you might have seen me squawking about earned secrets on the Animals blog a few years ago. And that has been where I have been at ever since then. Cool. So, yeah, and then as far as like my coding background, I've got none. I was actually one of those people that got really irritated when people would say learn to code because no, my current skills are valuable enough. Thank you very much. Writing is important. But now here I am 2 months of roughly into vibe coding and I'm like super obsessed with it. So yeah, as I said, I was like deeply anti-code for a long time, but one of my clients is the newsletter slash product studio slash consulting company, the multimodal media company, as they say, and Every does this thing every quarter where they do Think Week, which is where instead of you take a step back from your usual day-to-day tasks to like do some sort of divergent thinking, work on cool projects. And I was lucky enough to kind of get to hang out with them on their most recent Think Week in February. And one of the assignments for that Think Week was to try an AI tool we'd never used before. So I've been pretty pro AI for content, using a lot of ChatGPT, Lex, I'm a huge fan of. But this challenge was to use an AI tool I hadn't used before. And I had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to rebuild my website. And so one of the devs at Every, Andre, was like, oh, well, have you tried Lovable? And I was like, I have not tried Lovable. So I decided to try building a website with Lovable, and I will show you what that looks like now. Yeah, so this is my first go at creating a website, and I did this in 2 hours. My prompt for this one was literally just create a website for a thought leadership writer and consultant who specializes in B2B SaaS, and it was like, here you go.
That's insane. I saw this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I saw, as I was like prepping for this, I was pulling links for everybody and I saw this. I assumed it was like Squarespace or, Wix or one of these kind of portfolio building tools you use. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100% Lovable. And like, at first I just, put this up. Then, the one thing I did do with this one was I got a little bit ambitious when it came to the contact form. I was like, I want to make a functional contact form. The one on my old website was literally just, here's my email address, send me an email. And so I set this up, and that is when I started getting into some of the more involved parts of vibe coding, where you actually have to link things together. But again, it took me about 2 hours, probably 4 hours once you throw the email functionality in. And then from then on, I was just kind of hooked on vibe coding. Sean said he did 4 different projects. I've done 6, so I win. And if we actually go to my website, you can see all of my AI experiments because I lack shame, and they're just like all up here for you to look at if you'd like. So I've got the website itself. The next thing I built was a cliche catcher, which literally just does what Grammarly does. It catches tired and overused phrases. Then the next one I built was this earned secret excavator, which is what I was sent to Jimmy, which gathers a lot of information about you. It asks you some sort of like probing questions, then helps you put together a thought leadership brief that recommends how you can turn your initial idea into thought leadership. Concept Coiner, this is my problem child. Basically, it's an app that lets you come up with an ownable phrase or framework for like a TED Talk or like naming a product. It's a work in progress. And then the one I'm going to talk about in detail today is Swipe File. And the origin story of this one is my sort of coding guru, Ed, also from Every, wrote an article on a concept called selfish software, which is just the idea that you should build software to solve your own problems. And as a thought leadership ghostwriter, a problem that I run into again and again and again is clients not being able to articulate their taste, not being able to tell me what they like and don't like, and just being like, well, I don't like this. And I'm like, well, that's not super helpful to me as your thought leadership consultant. So I built this app, and the idea is that this app can help us learn more about our taste, what we respond positively to, what good looks like to us. So I'm just going to, here's the landing page, and then I'm just going to show you how it works, and then we'll look at Lovable. So here is the dashboard. And this is where you can see snippets that you've added. Content insights we'll get to in a second, but let's just say I want to add a new snippet. So, I found a piece of writing that I really like. So I can go here, and then I'm going to pull over a quote from an Amanda Mole article. Amanda Mole is a writer on consumer behavior, shopping, and stuff like that. She's a Business Insider now, but she was at The Atlantic when she did this. So I just really like this intro. And I like it because it's funny, it's playful, and it's provocative. And structure, it's narrative, substance. What do I like about this? Surprise and originality. And the format it's an essay. And so now I have all this information that I've given it, and I'm just going to save the snippet. And now here you can see all my snippets. They're all tagged by the different dimensions and formats. And then the really fun thing gets started when you go to Insights. So what Insights does is this will tell you about patterns it notices in the snippets that you've shared. So that's content patterns, preference, things you prefer in content, and then what you should do, recommendations about what you should do based on the content that you respond positively to. So let's generate some new insights since
That's so wild.
Snippet.
Sorry to interrupt you. That is so cool. It's so interesting. I'm just thinking of like how many times I've like sent a piece of writing to a client and they're like, make it snappier or something like that. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like it's such an interesting concept that there actually is a way to learn about your own taste and that you could help clients kind of find the words for providing better feedback as well.
Yes, that's all very aspirational at this point. And for me, because I haven't shared this super widely, but that is totally what the intent is. And to Sean's point about why we don't necessarily commercialize things that we built with no code, I'm getting an error message. Maybe we can debug that live. Would that be fun? I don't know.
Sure,
but
let's do it.
Let's get to the actual builder. And then I can show you how I might debug that because it's happened before. But here is my Lovable. Here's Lovable. And this is literally all you need. You can just drop, I want to build a website for a B2B SaaS content marketer right in here, and it'll go to town. And then you can see all my projects. There are 4 different ones for my current baby because I am trying different approaches. But so here's Swipe File. And we're going to wait for it to spin up a preview. And then let's just go up to the top of actually, you know what I want to do first? So this is the beginning of my conversation. And I did this. So we talked a little bit in the chat before I joined about one-shot prompting versus taking the time to sort of construct a prompt in advance. I've done both. I one-shotted my website. I one-shotted Cliche Catcher, kind of. This one, I did take a bit more of a structured approach. So you can see I went to ChatGPT and I said, I've got a new idea for a project I'd like to explore with you. ChatGPT is super down, as it usually is, for whatever you ask it to do. This is what I gave it. These are the original features that I had. I just wanted to clearly label what they like about the content, send that information to an underlying LLM, get analysis from the LLM about what the collected files suggest about the user's taste and what they respond positively to. I just was like, can we jam on this? And this is some stuff that Lovable came up with. And this is what I super love and why I kind of like one-shot prompting and being a little less prescriptive, is that ChatGPT actually suggested a lot of stuff in here that I thought that I had not come up with initially, like the recommendation engine, the writing assistant, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And so like it had some pretty good ideas. So what I ultimately did was I think I just copy and pasted like this stuff, and became the prompt right here. And this has everything, describes everything that I want it to do.
Okay, we just lost your screen share.
No, where'd it go? Stop sharing screen. Are we back?
We're back.
Okay. So it built the swipe file. And the first shot, it's like I'm not going to restore. I'm too scared that I'll lose everything. But one thing that is cool about Lovable is you can, at any point you get hopelessly lost and you ruin things beyond all hope of salvation, you can always go to the last version you were happy with and click this little restore button. So this is one of my sort of like best practice pieces of advice for people that are getting into this, or maybe like me and have like zero context. Never be afraid to just hit restore on the last version that you were happy with. So, yeah, and then the next thing that I knew I wanted to do was, and this was something that I knew. So interestingly, as far as the LLM capability integration, that's the next step in this process. And it was pretty smooth for me this time because I had built AI features into a couple of my projects before. Interestingly, when I built the cliche catcher, Lovable did not recommend AI. Lovable was like, we're going to build a database and we're going to have like a library of common cliches. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not managing all that. What about an LLM? And from there, it told me, okay, if you want to integrate an LLM, you need to set up a Supabase, which is sort of like a database management software that handles my LLM integration and my authentication. You'll notice Swipefile has a login. I'm not 100% sure if it's working right now, but you can certainly go there and try and see if you can log into Swipefile. So Supabase is where so basically I had to do three things once I knew I wanted to do an LLM. I had to set up a Supabase project for Swipefile. So I have a Supabase for every one of my projects. Then I had to go to OpenAI and create an API key to give to the Supabase. And then but all of that happened in Lovable, actually. So Lovable was like, go set up a Supabase instance. I did that. And then it said, okay, I set up a project in Supabase. There we go. And then it said, go get an OpenAI API key. I did that. And then from there, like I had AI functionality in here, and I could, like, as far as fine tuning the LLM to deliver the kind of outputs that I wanted, I just did that all through Lovable. I told it, one thing that I told it that I wanted to do was that I'm not logged in through this one. Everyone avert your eyes while it knows that my password isn't right.
I think it might be your first name.
It's my dog's name. Today is my dog's gotcha day.
Oh, sorry. I mean,
yeah. Okay. So for the insights, I knew I wanted the LLM to talk to the person in the first person, or the second person. Sorry, I am a writer. I know my people. And funnily enough, a couple days ago, I logged in to check in on this for this presentation, and the LLM produced content in the insights page had just completely drifted. It was very clinical. It was like, this snippet indicates XYZ. I was like, that's not what we talked about, Lovable. So I had to go in and remind it. But again, I just did that through Lovable. Yeah, and then some other things to highlight here. I mentioned debugging. We are having a problem with generating new insights, and the error message that we're getting says what's hidden behind toast notifications, and I can't actually see it right now. Okay, this was going to be so cool. Anyway, vibe debugging. There are, in my experience, most of vibe coding is actually vibe debugging and figuring out why things that you've built aren't working. what is broken, what you did wrong. And there are 3 ways I found that you can go about this, and I have done all 3 of them. One is just reading the error messages that you get in the developer console and just finding the red text, copying and pasting it, and putting it into Lovable and saying, what up? And usually when you do that, it'll be pretty straightforward to tell you what the error is and go fix it. Another thing that I've done is sometimes I just say, I suspect XYZ is not working. Like, for example, there was a problem with the authorization for this app. And I just said, I think something's up with the auth. Can you go look and see what's wrong? And it did it. And then when it's 1 a.m. in the morning and you are frantically trying to fix something and you have that feeling that you can't leave it alone until you fix it, sometimes you find yourself saying, it's not working, please fix. I would rank those in order of most recommended to least recommended in terms of how you're vibe debugging. But in my experience, what I sort of think is that clear vibe coding is about good writing, and good vibe debugging is about good reading. So at the
Oh, that's
bottom,
interesting.
both of these are skills that nominally, theoretically, as content marketers, we've developed. And so when you're prompting, you just want to be very clear and, descriptive. And if you have a specific output, you want prescriptive about what you're looking for. And then when you're debugging, you just want to be reading really carefully to make sure you're understanding what's going on correctly. And that's kind of my experience with debugging.
Really cool. Do you ever run into usage limits as you're debugging? Because I do find
Uh,
that in Claude. Like when I hit my limits, it's always because it'll write a bunch of code, I'll run it, it doesn't work, it does it again, doesn't work, and then I'm like, and then I hit a usage limit, now I have to wait 2 hours or whatever until I can do it again.
yeah, I should probably own up that I am currently on the $200 a month Lovable plan.
So no usage limits, I'm guessing.
No, so I hit usage limits a couple of times, and
Okay.
that's really funny. My buddy Ed was like, "Oh, building apps is so cheap now." I was like, well, cheap in relative terms, but like for my pocketbook, it's still very expensive. And so that's one of the reasons that I think it is worth learning to speak code, maybe not write code
Mm,
necessarily, but read it such that you can debug things and get things working more quickly and you're not running through all of those messages. And so
yeah.
for people who don't know, Lovable bills based on a number of messages. So for free, you get a certain number of messages and you can get as far as you can in building your app with that. $20, slightly larger number of messages, and then it just kind of scales up from there.
That makes sense. I think it's actually very cool that you started in ChatGPT and you basically scoped out the project before you started writing the code. Because I could imagine you just start in Lovable, you don't have a full spec written out yet, and then you get into make you do this. Oh no, not this. I want to do this, and oh, I have a new idea. Let's add that thing. Like I would imagine, the better your initial prompt, the easier all of this is.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I have layered in a lot of features after the fact with varying success. So for example, this workshop feature where like you can like get different kinds of challenges to, model the writing that you want to do that you've said you like. This I added belatedly and still not. We're going to vibe debug now. Okay, so we got the message. Edge function returned a non UXX status code. Can we fix? Let's see what happens. Where is it? It's down here. It's thinking. That's what this little button means. Okay, so it's something with the OpenAI responses. So it's just thinking in the background. We'll see if it fixes that. And let's see, what else did I want to talk about? I have a whole
Can I throw a
list.
quick question at you?
Oh yeah, please.
The mysterious digital asks, have you ever thought of yourself as a product manager when doing this, or are you sticking with the content person identity? I think it's a very interesting question.
I love that question. It's actually something I wrote. I wrote an essay about my career trajectory and how it's kind of changed, because what my experience is that AI coding tools like this and AI in general kind of explodes job categories in a way. We're no longer talking about ladders and jungle gyms. We're talking about like an acid trip, and you can like put together. I wrote actually. I think the version that I had Lex write is about careers as a disco ball. And so yeah, I've found ever since I started vibe coding, I've had a lot of opportunities to think more with a product manager hat on. And like I do that with how I approach my own workflows. I do that with how I approach my workflows with clients. I historically, like, project management is not my strong suit. That's kind of why I'm not in-house anymore. Because when you're in-house as a content marketer, you have to be a stellar project manager. And now I look at all my project management problems through the lens of how can I build to solve this and to, so I don't have to deal with this thing that I'm bad at.
Yeah, very cool. You recently published an article on Every about how your output is essentially you're a one person agency. I'll find the link and I'll put it in the chat. I thought it was really cool. Just like the way that you had changed your thinking on the way, like what it means to be a freelancer.
Yeah, that's AI turned me into a content agency of one is the article. It's paywalled, but everyone sign up for Every,
Every's
please.
really good.
It's a wonderful place to be and to learn about AI in particular. Um,
Let me
any other
pull.
questions?
Yeah, I'm going through the chat right now to pull up a couple of other questions for you. Someone mentioned we should do like a vibe coding workshop. I'm thinking we do a vibe coding hackathon. So I'll think about the logistics of that. It might be fun to do it where everyone like gets together. We spend an hour or two, and then we share what we built during that time. So I'll follow up about that. Janessa says, is anyone else vibe coding right now? Because Katie immediately inspired me to actually build a website for myself. That's really cool. I'm really glad, Katie, that you shared the use case of building a website because that's not something I had thought of. I thought it's like you build an app, you interact with it like you do an app. But how often in the Superpath community does somebody say, hey, I need to build a portfolio site. What should I use? And then there's like 1,000 different answers. But this is a really cool way actually like practice some vibe coding while getting something very useful out of it too.
Yeah, and it's just so customizable. Like that's actually where things started for me. I had mentioned on the stand up during Think Week that I had tried to use Squarespace because Squarespace is all like, we have AI features now, and it's basically just templates. And like when you use something like Lovable, it really is like completely customizable by you. You just say, I want it to look like this, and it does all of that for you. And I think, yeah, I think that as long as we're talking about who should be scared about vibe coding, I would say that website builders should probably be on notice.
Yeah, totally. A quick question from Grace. Is Swipefile deployed on Lovable or through GitHub? Still unsure where the Git comes into play. This is deployed on Lovable, right?
Yeah, I have not gotten into the domain buying game yet. So Lovable, you just like you kind of just automatically get um, a lovable UR branded URL, and I just have those used right now. I was actually interested to find out the answer to the question about whether you can put them on subdomains of your website, because obviously I would love to just like have all of these live on my website. For now they're lovable, and I do have a GitHub set up. I barely touch it. I just basically export my code from Lovable to GitHub so it lives in a second place just in case, I don't know, the catastrophic should happen.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Connor building an app has an MVP since I joined the call. That's so cool. Another quick question from Grace, a follow up about building portfolios. Do you need anything else? You need a domain, hosting provider, which I guess in this situation is Lovable. Do you need anything else to get a website out the door?
Well, if you want like my website is the one thing I do have a domain for. So like katieparrott.com, I had in my back pocket. So I had to like run through the adventure of pointing my DNS things to the things like deeply. You can see how untechnical I am as I'm trying to describe what I did. But yeah, for like, I would recommend if you're using it to like build a personal website, then it makes sense to have your personal URL that you own. The reason that all my other projects are just Lovable apps is because I was just getting them out the door. I have an itchy trigger finger when it comes to hitting publish. I like to publish and publish and publish again with these things every time I add something new. And it's just been easy to have the Lovable domains just there. That's actually on my to-do list, though, is to get rid of them. I think Lovable announced that you can do they either have or are soon adding the ability to do domains directly through Lovable.
That's awesome. We had a couple questions about Lovable specifically. Lindsay asked pros and cons of Lovable. Someone asked if you had tried Bolt as a potential alternative. That may be like too nitty gritty for this conversation, but I guess, are there any things that you find frustrating about Lovable specifically that you find you have to then maybe you have to go out to ChatGPT to get an answer and then come back?
Why is there an error? I honestly have been pretty happy in Lovable, and I haven't sort of looked around too terribly much. As far as what's frustrating, and like I haven't had too many problems. I mean, the one thing I will say is that like and I don't know if this is true actually. For a while, I thought that if you asked Lovable a question without wanting it to action it, that counts toward your messaging count. And then that feels kind of frustrating. So, like, the process of asking Lovable, if I do this, what will happen? That's something that I want to ask a lot and like kind of troubleshoot in advance or just get a sense of what's going to happen when I run this code. And Lovable, to my knowledge, doesn't do that.
Got it.
Which I think would be really helpful, particularly for apps that are aimed at a non-technical audience.
Got it. Mo, I'm so glad you brought this up. Katie, you mentioned you had thoughts on the death of SaaS earlier. Would love to hear more.
Yeah, so basically what it comes down to is I really feel like the name of the game is going to be build versus buy. So, like, just because you can build something doesn't mean that you should, and just because something exists off the shelf doesn't mean that you don't want to build something yourself. And it kind of ties back to some of the questions that got brought up earlier on this call about, like, how important is reliability? You know, if it's something where it needs to be working 100% of the time, then you probably want to buy a solution versus building one. If it's something where you have a really, really specific use case and you know nothing out there is going to be good enough for what you're trying to do, then I think it makes sense to buy or build. And so, like, that's kind of my big, like, crystal ball prediction for, like, the future of vibe coding is that build versus buy is going to be an ongoing conversation. And, like, it's going to be the kind of thing somebody's going to be, maybe the AIs will be writing search optimized posts for in 2-3 years.
Yeah. That's interesting. I've thought about this a lot recently because we run Superpath on Slack, thought about moving it to Circle. I've got a couple of demos and I was like, oh my gosh, it's all in one place. It'd be so much easier. You know what I mean? Like, we have billing in Stripe, we have the conversation in Slack, we have an Airtable base of members, all these things that we duct tape together through Zapier. And like in this particular case, ended up making sense to stick with what we got, try to improve it. But it's not hard to imagine someone going down the sort of like, I'm going to customize it, and then realizing like, wow, this is actually a huge headache if we need this to work all the time. So I think it makes a ton of sense. The Sassacre, I assume that's Sean Blanda saying the Sassacres here. Super cool. So much here. We have, wow, just like almost 2 hours here of stuff. We're going to publish all of this. Katie, thank you so much. Flyfile is really cool. I think it's a really, really cool app. I put the link to it in the chat so people can check it out. I will, of course, also email everybody afterwards with recording, all the links, everybody's LinkedIn, any of the links we mentioned in the chat, apps you can check out, etc. And I do think we should do a follow-up to this, maybe a hackathon or some kind of workshop so that people can actually do some stuff. Because what I'm seeing in the chat is people have been building alongside as they're listening to these presentations, which is really cool. So I guess one last time, let's shout out Riverside and Lex for sponsoring this event. Riverside.fm. You can host workshops, webinars, you can record podcasts, customer interviews, sales calls, etc. You'll see the output of the AI-powered editing after this. And then Lex, as we saw, it's an incredible tool built specifically for writers. Sammy was kind enough to come on and show us. So you can get 15% off with the code SP15 if you want to check it out yourself. And other than that, I think we're good. Thank you so much, everybody, for spending 2 hours with us. This was so much more awesome even than I thought, and my expectations were pretty high. So thanks to everybody, our presenters specifically, and for everyone who attended. So I think that's all we got. Have a great day, everybody. And for Superpath folks, we'll see you in Slack. Take care.